Picking up with slide 17, let's talk about 2-2 meter. So in 2-2 meter, we often say 2-2 time instead. The important thing to know here is that the beat is written as a half note. And the figure here on slide 17 shows one in 2-4 meter, or 2-4 time, and the other in 2-2 meter, or 2-2 time. So here's how the one in 2-4 sounds. We'll have 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay? Here's how the one in 2-2 time sounds. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay, so they actually sound exactly the same, but they just look different on the page, right? So for 2-2 meter, remember that the half note is the kind of rhythm that receives one beat. Let's move on here to slide 18. Notice that the half note in 2-2 time is the same duration as the quarter note in 2-4 time, right? The relationship is constant for other note values as well. So for example, quarter and eighth notes in 2-2 time are the same durations as eighths and 16th notes in 2-4 time. We're going to talk a little bit more about 16th notes later on in this chapter. Picking up with slide 19, let's practice clapping some of these rhythms in 2-2 time. So let's try example A. So we'll have, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Repeat. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay, so now, right, half notes get one beat, and quarter notes they get half a beat each, and whole notes get 2 beats, right? So in 2-2 time, everything is sort of like in half, or cut in half from 2-4 time. Let's try example B. Okay, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2 and. Okay, so that's B. Let's try C. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay. D. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2 and. Okay. Moving on to slide number 20. Let's practice these rhythms in 3-4 time. Okay, A, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. I'm not going to do the repeats on these, but you should do it at home. Okay, B, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, C. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So on C, notice in the third measure that there's a tie from the first beat to the second beat. So that measure should sound like how I just did it, but also, again here, just the third measure of C. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, let's look at D. Okay, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3. Moving on here to slide 21. Let's practice these ones. A, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. B, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, C, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. D, ready? Before we do D, notice that there's a tie in the first measure going from the second beat to the third beats, and also in the second measure from the second beat to the third beats. Okay, let's try D. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let's move on. Slide 22. Let's talk about this thing called the anacrusis. So rhythms do not necessarily begin on the first beat of a measure every time. So often you will see one or more notes before the first full measure. And these kind of notes are called an anacrusis, or sometimes just an upbeat. So if we're looking at our example here on slide 22, notice that what's my time signature or my meter signature here? It's 3/4. And I only have one quarter note in that first measure that we see. And so I know that in 3/4 time, how many beats per measure do I have? Well, I'm supposed to have 3, right? Because the top number tells me 3. And what kind of note receives one beat? Well, that's going to be a quarter note. So I see that I have one quarter note in this incomplete measure here. So I know that it's not going to be beat 1, right? It's not beat 2, but it is going to be beat number 3, right? So I'm going to start this on the third beat, right? So if I'm playing this little example here on my keyboard, I'm going to start 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, so I'm going to start on the third beat. Hey, if you have a keyboard, maybe try this with me. So let's see if we can play these notes. We're starting on a G and come in on the third beat. So go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, so that's that first note that's labeled anacrusis. That's the anacrusis, also sometimes called an upbeat. Let's move on to slide 23. So the anacrusis, a little bit more about this. If a melody begins on an upbeat, you are likely to find similar patterns elsewhere in the melody. So if we're looking at this tune here, we see that we have an anacrusis, of course, right at the very beginning, but then we have several others throughout this melody. So you can see that at each point where we see anacrusis, it's a quarter note on the third beat, right? And so that is a similar pattern to what we see at the very beginning. So if we see our note, our anacrusis, our upbeat on the third beat as a quarter note, we see it kind kind of showing up in other places. So let's try playing this melody and counting it and noticing where the anacrusis are. So go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, anacrusis 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, anacrusis there, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Then here's another anacrusis on the third beat, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, and usually what you'll find is if the last measure of the piece is an incomplete measure, like we see here, it is here on slide number 23. See, the last measure only has 2 beats, right? All we see there is a half note, so 2 beats. So it's incomplete because we should have 3 beats per measure, because that's what the time signature tells us. So often we'll see an incomplete measure with the remaining beats, or the beats that the first incomplete measure doesn't have. So we can see that at the very beginning, our incomplete measure only has 1 beat on the third beat, like we just talked about in the last slide. And the last measure has 2 beats. So the last incomplete measure and the first incomplete measure, the ending and the beginning add up to 3. So if you're not sure what beats your melody is supposed to start on, sometimes you can look at the last measure and you can see, okay, well, what's missing here? If I've got 2 beats here and there's supposed to be 3, well, it's probably going to be that the very beginning starts on the third beat. Moving on, slide 24. Okay, so that's what I just talked about. Usually the final measure will be shortened by the rhythmic value of the upbeat. And I guess one other thing that I didn't mention before, this allows for repetition of the melody without breaking the regularity of the meter. So if I play like the last measure and go back into the very beginning, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Now I'm back at the beginning, right? 3, 1. Okay. So take a moment and see if you can practice this melody if you have a keyboard on your keyboard. See if you can practice it where you're also counting it like I was doing earlier on the last slide. Although I did kind of stop here and there to point out where the anacrusis was. So my rhythm wasn't perfectly accurate with the way I played it. Okay, so let's move on here to slide number 25. Let's look through the songbook to find examples of songs that begin with upbeats. So let's see here. If I remember correctly, the songbook starts on page 236. Okay, yeah, here it is. So let's see here. Okay, so I see actually the very first one, America the Beautiful. It starts with an upbeat, right? Or an anacrusis. We can see that we're supposed to have 4 beats per measure in America the Beautiful. And the very first measure is incomplete, and there's only 1 beat, right? So I can also see at the very end of America the Beautiful, there is an incomplete measure as well. It's a dotted half note, which means that there's only 3 beats in that measure. So I can see that I'm supposed to come in on the 4th beat of America the Beautiful, right? So I'm going to have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and so on. Okay, so just kind of look through the songbook and start kind of familiarizing yourself with what upbeats or upbeats and anacrusis, they're synonyms, so it means the same thing. Just see if you can find some in there and maybe even practice a few of them. Picking up with slide number 26. let's talk about subdivision of the beat. So we've already kind of talked about division of the beats, right? In simple division, we divide the beat into two. But we can further subdivide the beats. So if you would listen to track 6, right? I have a link on here that goes to it, and what you're going to hear at the very beginning is a guy saying 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, right? So what's happening here is a division of the beats into fours, right? So we're dividing it into 4. And go ahead and, as you're listening to that track, clap along with it, right? Just clap quarter notes for now, and kind of say it like you hear the guy in the clip say it, right? So it's kind of like 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So what you're doing there is you're clapping the beat, but you're subdividing with your counting, right? With your voice into 4, right? 1E and that's 4, okay? So this subdivision of the quarter note into 4 parts is notated with something called 16th notes, right? Which we haven't really talked about yet, but this is just another type of rhythm that you should add to your repertoire of rhythm. So, so far in this class we've learned about many different types of rhythms. We learned about quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, dotted half notes, dotted quarter notes, right? Okay, so all kinds of them. So this is just another kind of rhythm. Okay, in fact, let's clap the example on the bottom of slide 26 here. So we should have 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Okay, I did the repeat on that one. Okay, moving on to slide 27. So, as far as subdivision of the beats into 16th notes here, 2 beams are used in these groups of 16th notes. So when they appear alone, they are written with 2 flags. Okay, so it's kind of similar to 8th notes, right? Where if we group them together, we'll use a beam. And then with 16th notes, we'll have 2 beams. And remember with 8th notes that we might have 1 flag, but with 16th notes we're going to have 2 flags if it's just a single 16th note. Picking up with slide 28. Let's practice the one that's on top here. Okay, I'm not going to do the repeats, but you should practice these with the repeats on your own after you watch this video. Okay, so let's do the one. We have 4 exercises here. Let's do the one on top. So I'm going to count the subdivision of the beat, right? I'm going to count 1E and a 2E and a for all of these. But notice where my 8th notes land. Like in the first measure, they're going to land still on 1E and a 2E and a. So they're still kind of like 1 and 2 and. So you're still landing on a number and an and. Whereas with the 16th notes, like on the second measure, you're going to be clapping on every subdivision that you say. So like 1E and 2. That would be the second measure. Let's try this. Maybe we'll go a little bit slow. Okay, so let's do the top example. Ready? So we'll see 1 and 2, go. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. Okay, let's do the next example, the one underneath the first one. Okay, ready, go. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. Okay, Now let's do the third example. Okay, so 1 and 2, go. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. Okay, so notice on the second measure of this third one, you've got an eighth rest on the first beat. So that second measure, your first clap is on the and of 1. So that second measure, if I play it by itself here, we got 1E and a 2E and a. Okay, let's do the last one now. Notice that we've got an eighth rest at the beginning of the first measure and the second measure. Okay, ready, go. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E. Okay, picking up with slide 29, let's talk about the dotted eighth note. So the dotted eighth note works in much the same way as a dotted quarter note, or even a dotted half note for that matter. It follows the same logic. Remember, in the last chapter, we learned that the dot that's next to a note adds half the value of that note. So if we recall, let's take a dotted quarter note, for example. Hey, all we do to figure out how many beats a dotted quarter note gets is we go, okay, what's a quarter note? If a quarter note gets 1 beat, then the dot adds half of 1 beat, right? So what's half of 1 beat? Or what's half of a quarter, right? Half of a quarter is an eighth. So we're just adding an eighth to a quarter, right? And so that's where we get that 1.5 beats. So the dotted eighth note, it follows the same logic, okay? So we're just taking an eighth note and we're saying, what's half of an eighth note? Well, half of an eighth note is a 16th note. So we're just adding 1/16th note to an eighth note, okay? And you can also maybe think of it as, so a dotted eighth note is equivalent to 3 16th notes, okay? And I know that this is probably a little confusing for some of you. So let's actually go to the next slide, number 30. I think once you start kind of doing it and clapping it, it's going to make more sense. So let's look at, I've got a few different examples here on slide number 30. Let's look at the top example. So this is a dotted eighth note followed by a 16th note. Notice we're going to clap. The dotted eighth note starts on the first beat, and the 16th note is on the right at the end. So if you count this one with me, it'll go, okay, ready, go. 1E and okay, so I'm clapping on 1E and then the at the end. So 1E and So that's so we can kind of see that dotted eighth note. It lasts for 3 16th notes, and then my 16th note at the end is where I clap again. So let's look at the middle example now here that I have on slide 30. So with this one, we have a 16th note followed by a dotted eighth note. So with this one, we're going to clap on 1 for the 16th note and then on E, right? So I'm going to go 1E and okay? So on this one, my dotted eighth note again, it lasts for 3 of those 16th notes. So like 1E and okay? So these are really common. When we see a dotted eighth note, we often see a 16th note next to it that we're also going to clap. Okay, so I hope that those make sense. At least if you can clap it and count it correctly, then you're on the right track. So let's practice clapping and counting some 16th note and 8th note rhythms. So let's see here. We've got A, B, C, D, E here on slide number 31. Let's do A. And I'm not going to do the repeats, but you should do the repeats on your own. Okay, A. Ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and all right. B. Here I'm going 1 E and so I'm clapping on 1 E, also and then I'm just saying at the end. So 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and so it's 2 16th notes followed by an 8th note on this one. On B. Let's try C. Okay, on this one, this is like what we saw on the last slide. This is a dotted 8th followed by a 16th. Okay, C. Ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and okay, so I'm clapping on 1 and right? Okay, D. This is also like what we saw on the last slide. This one is a 16th followed by a dotted 8th. So let's try D. Ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and so I'm clapping on 1. I'm clapping on the number and then E, right? So 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and okay. Now let's do the last one, labeled E. So with this one, we see a 16th followed by an 8th followed by a 16th. Okay, let's just practice the first beats of this one first, of E. So I'm clapping on 1 E and so I'm clapping on all the beats here except and. When I say and, I do not clap. 1 E and okay, let's do this whole one here. Okay, ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and okay. All right, moving on to slide number 32. Let's practice some more of these 16th notes. So let's do A. So I see A, B, C, D. Let's do A. Okay, ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 and 3 E and okay. B. Ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and okay. C. All right, let's do it. C. Ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 3 E and okay. D, sorry. Okay, let's do D. Ready, go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and okay. Moving on, slide 33. All right, let's talk about triplets. You have learned that the beat can be divided into 2 parts, right? And we call that simple division. And in the last chapter, we learned that the beat can also be divided into 3 parts, which we call compound division. Occasionally, compound divisions will occur in songs with simple meter. So a compound division in simple meter is called a triplet. And a triplet is shown by just adding a number 3 to the notated rhythm, right? So if we practice clapping the little example here on 33, 1 and 2 and triplet,